Hello and welcome to episode 74 of Tom's Hirschsprung's podcast. I'm delighted to welcome back Ashley Matthews for part two, where we're going to talk about a range of different topics, all to do with Hirschsprungs, but a range of different topics, including being a special needs parent, being a GI parent, little bits about pull through, and neurodivergent as well, which is a new word I learned thanks to Ashley. So thank you very much. But again, welcome back, Ashley.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I
I'm
appreciate
glad
it.
to have you back. Thank you so much. Now, before we start, I know you mentioned it a little bit in the last episode, but for people who um, haven't heard the last episode, can you just very briefly explain what you are qualified in?
Oh, sure. After everything that happened with Milo, I had sort of a nervous system collapse. And so, out of actual necessity, I had to learn all about nervous system regulation. And in doing so, I learned all about somatics and somatic practices that help you get grounded into your body. So I got certified as a somatic core centering practitioner. And from that, it led to a lot of energy healing modalities. And so I'm a Reiki level 2 practitioner now, and will be getting my Reiki master as well. So, yeah, it led to all of the things now.
Fantastic.
When you're kind of at when you fall completely to the bottom, you have to figure out how to crawl and climb your way back out to the top. So that's what I had to do.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. And really, really good to hear that you've got qualified in something that is really, really relevant when it comes to sort of, I guess, chronic illness and things that we have. I think it's incredibly relevant, and we'll obviously talk about it a little bit later on. But I guess we'll start sort of where we finished the last episode. We finished talking
Mm-hmm.
about different types of treatment, and there was one in particular we didn't quite get to in terms of the rash tips um, that we'll crack on with later. But in terms of the kind of invasiveness of
Mm-hmm.
those particular treatments, I know you wanted to touch a little bit on that to start with.
Yeah. So I think so. We said goodbye, and then we just started talking a little bit more about the medical trauma that goes along with being a special needs parent of someone who has a chronic disease. And then, it kind of evolved from there where we started talking about your experience versus Milo's experience with a pull through. But I think the hardest part for me is, being a Hirschsprung's parent. People don't realize the level of invasiveness this is, and that's something that has like really worried me. Something that, because he has dual diagnosis, because he has Down syndrome as well, um, I don't I don't know for sure that he understands fully what is going on and why. My husband always tells me that, this is his normal. This is all he knows. This is how he's able to poop. But I feel like, on a subconscious level, he knows that like this isn't right, because sometimes he can go in a different way, like normally. Um, and it's just not a it's just not a place or an area where people should, or anyone really should, feel like they have no autonomy with, and he's a child. And that type of thing, I think, for Hirschsprung's kids has to be extremely difficult. And to touch on the medical trauma for us, um, I realized that every time we had to go in to see a GI specialist, every time he had like an anal irrigation where we had to go in and like have 3 people holding him down and doing these procedures, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, and every single time we had to go do that, like I was in shambles. And I realized I had PTSD when we went to his a sleep study, just like, regular sleep study. And he was like having to get all the things put on his face and on his chest and everything. And he was screaming because he hates that because he's got sensory issues, differences as well. And I just about had a panic attack. I like my husband kind of like picked up on it and saw what was going on because I was trying to hold him. And I was like this close to like full on panic attack. And he's like, let me take over. And so we switched and I had to like calm myself down and I realized, okay, yeah, this is more to the story because your body doesn't realize the difference. Your body doesn't know timelines. Your body knows, your subconscious knows what being put into fight or flight, like me having to either like fight for his life, essentially, is what my body thinks. Um, and I was like, okay, I need to address this because, like, with every lab work or with like, just his regular things that we've got to do, I can't be like crumbling and having a panic attack about it. Um, like some of the things are absolutely warranted. Some of them have been horrendous, and it makes sense to be um, having a really emotional response. But at the same token, when you're responding like that and reacting like that, how do you think that he's going to respond? So learning all about like what's happening in my nervous system, understanding it, like fully understanding what's going on, learning, having the practices to lean on and the tools so I can pull myself out of it and be as regulated as possible for him. And then I can close my stress response later once that trigger is like, and once the stressor is sort of at bay. um, so I mean, I just realized over time, and things just kept like opening for me to learn more, and it it's changed my life truly. Like I've had issues with anxiety my entire life. So when I became a special needs parent and all of these like medical complexities were a part of it, I was just like, oh my god, how am I going to do this? I mean, I'm like, I get super queasy around blood and like needles and all of the things. And, it's just been kind of a part of my life. And I was just like, oh, well, I guess I have anxiety and that's what it is. And that actually doesn't have to be the case. It doesn't, I've all but healed my anxiety disorder. I get anxious about things, but I'm not an anxiety ridden person anymore because I understand it. I understand what's going on and I meet my needs as they arise. So I think for Milo and his every other day invasive treatment, we just try to normalize it as much as we can. We talk him through it. We sing, we don't, we're not just like, okay, let's do this. Like, just get it over with and negate his feelings in it because, I feel like that's harmful for him to have something like this happening and it not be addressed like in real time. So we do our best, but at the same time, he has Down syndrome too. So his full ability to understand, we're not 100% sure. So it's tough.
It is. It is most definitely, and I think you explained that really, really well in terms of, and it is PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
and some people can probably think about that and go, well, that's quite a strong way of wording it, but I don't think it is. I think
No.
that's absolutely the right way of wording it, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's important. I know we touched on before. It's important that we consider parents' feelings because they're there every step of the way, as well as the child's feelings. And it's not
Right.
to say that, once you reach a certain age as a child and you've gone through all of these invasive surgeries and enemas and, I mean, bowel washouts potentially, that just because you don't have to do them anymore, the mental scars or emotional scars aren't there. I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's also really, really important to touch upon as well. And I dare say as well, there are a lot of people listening to this who might be similar age to me in sort of the late 20s, early 30s that did have to go through a lot of these things. And those thoughts and those feelings will still be there in the subconscious, very
Yeah.
much so. I know we talked, as you said, we talked for a while off air after our last episode, and you brought up so many, whether it be treatments or so many really interesting points that I had to go back to my parents and ask my parents and say, "Did I have this? Did I have that?" And they said,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, you had this, and this is what we did with it, and this is how we treated it." And so many things that I just didn't remember,
Yeah.
but it
Or
must
could
have
have
been,
blocked.
yeah, or must have still been my subconscious some way or another, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so in what you were telling me too about the difference between a pull through surgery 30 years ago to now, I mean, it's up to you if you want to share that,
Absolutely.
but
Go for it.
I was floored by it.
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
you tell.
I will. I will. So again, for those, and I have interviewed people who are around my age and a little bit older who have a similar story to tell when it comes to the pull through. But for anybody who's listening to this now and their child might be, relatively young, sort of under 10 years old or whatever it might be, you might end up with scars that Milo has, where you've got very small scars at either side.
Laparoscopic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's completely different than for people around my age, probably be slightly younger. So I have many, many scars. I won't go through them all because we'll be here all day. But two main scars. So I have sort of one just underneath my hips that's a very long line, and then there is another scar just above my hips, and they stretch from hip to hip. But the second scar is essentially like a train track. And it's a very long scar with little segments, like a train track, little segments in between. And when I explain that again, when I explain that to you, you're
Yeah.
shocked at it because you think, well, that's not what my son had. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's also good to see in a way that we've made medical advancements when it comes to pull through surgery.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thankful. I'm thankful where we are now. And there's so much more to come. But to have that comparison, I mean, that really shocked me. And you have short segment at
Yeah,
that. But you also had an ostomy bag, right? For a little
I
while.
did. Yes. So when I was
Okay.
born, had a stoma, had that
Mm-hmm.
reversed a few weeks in, then had an Ace Malone, or
Right.
yeah, Ace Malone surgery when I was 9 until I had it reversed when I was 23, but stopped
Mm-hmm.
using it around 15. And that was to
Okay.
do the washouts, which again was interesting because I asked my parents about the washouts when I was, 9, 10, because I couldn't remember. And you said in the last episode about Milo not wanting the enemas and he'd pretend to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Um, and because you'd have to do them every other day. But for me, the washouts originally were every day, and then they were every other day. And I can remember, again, thinking back, I can remember dreading them. And then they became every weekend. I think it was every Sunday night or afternoon. I used to then have to do the washouts all the way up until I was 15. And that
Mm-hmm.
that was, yeah, especially when you're 12, 13, 14 going through that. It's not very nice. And then you
No,
try
that's
and,
got it. It's brutal too, because you were
yeah,
also playing sports and you
yep,
want to be doing fun things with your friends. Yeah, you have this medical condition that like not a lot of people understand. It's kind of like this hidden secret, that people it's a hidden disability,
it
really,
is.
because a lot of people you wouldn't know.
Nope.
We have I have the fact that Milo has Down syndrome, so they can look at him and say he has a disability. But people don't know the extent of what our lives are like because of Hirschsprungs.
Yeah.
It's
And
hidden.
even if again you mention the word Hirschsprungs to somebody, they go,
What's
yeah,
that?
no idea what that is. So
Right.
it's yeah, it's it's difficult, isn't it? Because it is, like you said, a hidden disability.
Hmm.
But for a lot of people, still very much requires medication. Whether that be in the form of the washouts or the enemas or irrigations or whatever it might be. Still very
Hmm.
much. I mean, I think I was quite fortunate in a way that I'd stopped the bowel washouts when I was 15, and apart from a surgery I had when I was 23 to um, reverse the ACE, touch wood, I've not needed anything else.
Hmm.
Which again is a lot of people who I talk to have short segment. And again, this isn't a medical diagnosis, but there are a lot of people that I talk to who have short segment who, as time goes on, need um, less and less medication or enemas or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And that's the hope.
Which that is, I guess, that is the hope for everybody. I'm not, just a disclaimer that I'm not saying that's going to be the same for absolutely everybody, but there are a lot of people, and if you'd said to me, would have been 25 years ago when I'm having all of these medications. I remember, again, so many things with your episodes that trigger things in my brain that I haven't thought about for 20 years. And now
I'm
because I'm
sorry.
talking to you, everything's coming up. I feel this is my episode rather than yours, but I'll carry on.
Well, it's important. I think it's important to hear, especially for parents like me that are hoping that, that our kids will live normal lives when they're adults and, and not have to have all these interventions and treatments all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're a success story for us, and to hear all of this too, I think that's a huge important thing that people need to consider. If you are an adult or if you are a teenager and have gone through a lot of medical trauma, especially in your childhood, and if you are a parent of a child with special needs or a disability and you have not addressed medical trauma and you're hearing this right now, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you it's time. It's time because that emotion, that experience, that trauma lives in your body and it will present. And I'm not trying to be like a fear monger or anything, like it will do something terrible, but it will present in some way. And so, and that just means that it needs to be released. It needs to be looked at. That version of yourself that went through that is asking you to just be there for them. Is asking you to say, I see you. I know you went through this. I know it was really hard and I'm sorry. And and something like happens when you do that. Something happens in your body that says, okay, yeah, you know what? I do have something to release. I do have something to say, and and then then you can move on. I think that's when we started talking about brain spotting and
Mm.
the trauma therapy that I've been doing. Um, but I didn't mean to interrupt what you were
No,
saying.
no, no, carry on. The brain spotting is a really interesting
It
thing that you
is.
mentioned as well. Um,
Yeah.
because I did, again, so many things that you told me last week. I am now thinking about and doing in my life.
Your attunement. You've been
I
attuned.
have, I have. I've learned the word attunement. I've learned how to spell it. Everything's great. Um, yeah. So brain spotting. Interesting because I did this when I was out running the other week, and then if I looked in one place whilst I was running, I felt something, and then I looked in another place, I would feel another thing. So sometimes when I'd look to the left, I wouldn't feel as tired, and if I looked to the right, I would feel more tired, which
Oh.
I thought was interesting. But that's my very brief
Mhm.
thing with brain spotting. But you obviously know a lot more about it. And would you like to just sort of give a little overview?
I would love to. um, and what you probably were doing is like a form of resource spotting. And so let me put a disclaimer: I'm not a brain spotting practitioner. I have absolutely considered it, and that may be my future because it has been so life changing for me. But brain spotting is a somewhat like EMDR. EMDR is where your eye movement is changing. Brain spotting is a fixed gaze. So, and you're working with a trauma therapist who is a brain spotting practitioner. And basically every single memory, if you like could roll the tape back and see where I was looking when I was recalling Milo's story, for example, or if I was talking, let's see, all right, I'm talking about his sleep study and see how my eyes go directly here.
Yeah.
That sleep study memory lives there in my body. Your eye gaze and where you feel it in your body is where that memory is held. And there's a train that's about to go by in case you can hear it. But as you recall memories, you can just, and it's funny to, once you realize this, that when you are talking to someone and they're telling a story and they're looking in a certain direction, you're like, that's where that memory lives. But you're basically, if you want to recall something and work through it and process it, you're basically looking or kind of doing a scan of your body. Can you hear this train? Okay, let me pause and let it go by. Where my shop is in a historic village, and there's a train that goes by every day. As you are recalling a memory. Oh, okay, I got you. Good. So as you are recalling a memory that you are ready to process, and the key about trauma is being ready. It's not something to be forced. It's not something that like someone says it's time for you to address this. No, it is when you have a knowing within yourself that you are ready to talk about it, release it. The good thing about brain spotting is you don't have to actually say anything. It's not like talk therapy. You can say what you want, but it is very body based, somatic. It's very somatic based, where if you feel into your body and do kind of a scan and you're thinking and trying to recall that memory, that sleep study, when I look over here and I'm recalling it, I can sort of feel a space in my back that feels a little uncomfortable, like the back of my neck, like my shoulders are a little tense. And then I almost always feel it in my sacral solar plexus area of my chakras, but like in my stomach. And so the practitioner will do like a straight line with this pointer. So they'll do a straight line within the horizontal axis, and where you feel that in your body is where you're trying to, like, you kind of have a good idea at first, but she's just making sure that that's the spot. So they do the horizontal axis, and then you say, yeah, that's where I'm feeling that same sensation. And then they do the vertical axis and go back and forth, and then you lock in to that point. And as you're locked in, they keep that pointer in that same point. And you're like, yes, I feel these same sensations. Like all of these memories of this experience is flooding back. And typically there's a pretty emotional response, because as you are keeping your gaze, as you are keeping this here, and your body is like getting that recognition, that part in your body that's saying, you've forgotten about me. Like, I need to be seen. I need to be released. And it's not released in a way where it's like, or it's not something that you need to just pretend doesn't exist, or it's an integration of that experience where it's like, this happened to me. Yes, I'm seeing this. And then you can release the emotional response that comes along with it, that you hold without even realizing it. So the next time that I talk about a sleep study, if I have brain spotted on this, which I haven't yet, probably should, the next time that I talk about the sleep study, um, I won't have, my body won't have the same kind of like fight or flight response to that memory because I have released that part of it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't still, that the memory doesn't exist for me. It's just that it doesn't hold such activation in my body. I can speak to it from a regulated state as opposed to being like triggered and feel my stomach hurting and like my shoulders hurting and all of the things. Um, so that's what brain spotting does. And once I learned about that and learned how that like somatic response in your body is directly tied to things that are hidden deep down in the layers of your subconscious, I was like, okay, I can do something here. I can do something about this. And and in being as regulated as I possibly can, I can co-regulate with Milo even easier now because there are things that have happened in my life and my life experiences that are apart from the medical trauma with Milo that I've held on to for years and years and years that have, you know, that have impacted me in such a way that things that happened 20 years ago, just like what's happened for you, um, hold such an activated emotional, like almost breakdown type of response because your body doesn't know the timeline. So if I am recalling something that happened to me when I was 19 years old and I haven't processed it, my body thinks that I'm right back there again and I'm triggered in the exact same ways. And then you have to deal with that. And a lot of people are just like, "Oh, that's hard. I don't want to do this. Let me drink, let me smoke, let me dopamine hit my phone and just scroll out of this." When instead addressing it and then closing that stress response, which means like getting some exercise, like meeting that activation with a level of regulation. Like I like to use a vibration plate because like doing that kind of activates your fight or flight, but in a really safe way. I listen to binaural beats on my headphones and I have like a weighted blanket. And so it's kind of like I'm meeting that activation. And then as soon as it stops, I get this like flood of serotonin. It is, or not serotonin, but endorphins. And it is
Yeah.
amazing. um, but I guess it's just like learning those things over time. I wish more people knew about it. I wish more people could pay attention to the subtleties in their body and how they change and how they become rigid when a topic is broached and when a memory is surfaced. And it happens so often that when you vice it away or push it down even further, like I'm not ready to talk about that. I don't want to bring that up. Then you just abandon yourself over and over and over.
Yeah.
It's self-sabotage. But let's coat this with a little compassion as well. When something like this happens, it's not easy. It's not easy to address. It is much easier to deflect and to not want to take notice because I feel like a lot of times when people are having some kind of response that you're like, whoa, what the hell is wrong with that person? Like it's literally something that it's something that they've been triggered by that they have not addressed, that's been covered up for years and years and years. And so they have a really emotional reaction to it. And so I think the compassion for having people, like, I feel like when I meet people, I just want to be like, what happened to you? Like I'm not a small talk type of person anyways. And I just want to be like, what happened? Like what happened? If they feel ready to discuss it. And that's kind of what I'm doing now in my practice of Reiki healing energy and learning about your chakras and somatic practices to be able to integrate back into embodiment. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think that all of that is it's just so important, which is why I wanted to do this episode with you, because I think it's incredibly important to look at the mental and the emotional side that
Mhm.
we just don't, because, and I think partially as
It's
well.
hard.
Yeah, but it is hard. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that last bit up as well, that we're saying, try and do this and do that, and but actually to say, yeah, this is difficult as well. Actually, you're not just going to go straight into a memory or bunch of memories or medical procedures, think about it, and then 15 minutes later, everything's cool again. It doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. It doesn't
That's
work like
why
that at all.
talk therapy never worked for me, because I would like spill my guts about all of these terrible things. And then I would leave, like, I wouldn't be given any tools to process it. I would just have that kind of release of like, okay, I said it. It's been said, it's out there. But there was nothing else to help me process it. And so I'd leave, like, I went on my lunch break and I'd go back to work, and I'm re-traumatized by telling this story that that wasn't processed in a way that was helpful to my body, to my subconscious, to my nervous system. It just triggered me again. So I mean, I did that for years and years and years. I was just like, therapy is not helping me. Like, therapy doesn't work. But like, talk therapy can work in a way, as long as you have the somatic practices to pair with it. It's
Mm,
super important.
yeah,
But I think for kids, with Hirschsprungs, for parents who've dealt with medical trauma, for adults who've had it and don't, and are just like, that was a long time ago. I don't think, it doesn't really phase me now. Um, I think there could be things. There
mm,
could be things to look at. Um,
yeah,
and to give yourself so much grace, to give yourself so much compassion, and and know that, like, obviously these things are not your fault.
no,
And sometimes it feels like if I could take this stuff away from Milo, I would do it in a heartbeat. And I hope that he understands that we're doing these things because we have to, and because, and we're doing everything we possibly can to make it better and to make it easier. And sometimes life just is.
is
Sometimes life is just
yeah,
how it is.
and that's a tricky one sometimes to understand at such a young age as well. And I know I speak to parents all the time, and there is that sort of reluctance to do the washouts or the enemas, or and partially because they might be at an age where they don't understand. None of their friends have to do this, so why do I have to do
Mm-hmm.
this? And
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really difficult thing.
Yeah.
Really,
Or
really
they're
difficult
fighting
thing.
it, like
Yeah,
actively fighting it. And then you have this whole, like, I don't know, just terrible energy around it to begin
yeah,
with, where you're like, okay, you have to go in this like battle of a child that is just like, I mean, it takes two people for me and Milo, or for us to do Milo's enema. And I used to be able to do it by myself, but he's getting too strong now and he doesn't want to do it. And that in itself is stressful,
yeah.
super stressful.
Very, very. And I know just while we've got sort of quarter of an hour left on this, I know there's another topic that you wanted to cover in neurodivergent
Yeah.
parents. Now we've spoken a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about this as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
would you like to, yeah, talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So in my discovery, in the fact that a lot of my special interests are, in energy, frequency, vibration, nervous system regulation, and everything having to do with Hirschsprungs, you know, um, I discovered over time that my brain doesn't quite tick the same way as others. Um, I was diagnosed with ADHD like early 20s, but I was just like, I don't know what that is. And I just like tried Adderall for a while and hated it. And it didn't work very well for me. And it just kind of like spun me up and gave me all this fake energy, but I still wasn't like actually able to focus on anything. It just didn't work very well for me. Um, but most recently, last year, I'm a bit on the spectrum as well, and found that out. And it is because of my son, because of Milo's diagnoses, and because of the things that I've learned about autism, the things that I've learned about neurodivergence from being a special needs parent. And so I started to, and as a neurodivergent person would, I started to pick up on patterns. So pattern recognition is really huge for someone that has a brain like mine. And so I started picking up on these patterns where neurodivergent, especially moms of special needs kids, have this intuition. And like you always hear about like the mama's gut. And you don't have to be neurodivergent to have fantastic intuition as a medical parent. But I have just found that a lot of times when people are talking about picking up on and like knowing, just knowing like something's up, something's wrong, a lot of times they end up being neurodivergent. And so I think the thing is with being a special needs parent, you are, especially one that is nonverbal for the first 4 years of his life, you know, and I have to try to piece together communication and know what his needs are and be aware of his safety at all times. You know, all of these things like hyper attuned me to his energy and made me hyper vigilant, which is sort of the downfall of having a neurodivergent brain, because anxiety like is tied so very closely together, because I'm hyper vigilant about his safety, his surroundings, his, you know, his needs. I am completely unaware of my own needs and taking care of myself. And you know, this is how I was like having self-care practices and knowing if I'm dysregulated, not even like realizing how dysregulated I was on a daily basis. And how anxiety was just kind of running the show. You can't pick up on intuition very well when you are anxious all the time. And so there's like this, there's a piece to the puzzle, I think, where, you know, I tell people that like if Milo were in this next room over here and I couldn't see him, but I'm talking to you and there's birds that are singing and there's cars that's going by and whatever the case may be, I'm still in this, but I know exactly what he's doing at all times. And I know that I need to jump up and make sure that he doesn't pull this thing down on himself or like be crawling on whatever. And so my energy is pushed out to attune to what he's doing at all times because his safety relies on it. And my ability to be regulated relies on making sure that he's safe. So that in itself is what I have started to realize, is that most of the people that I talk to that have, you know, a lot of really intuitive abilities end up having kids that are also neurodivergent or have a disability.
Yeah.
And then later on, they're like, you know what? I think I do too. I'm like, sure do. You sure do. And I mean, it's kind of, it's not funny because there's a lot of challenges that come along with it too. But there are also some really good parts too. So yeah, I think the intuition sort of like brought on this need for the intuition that broke into anxiety. It brought on this need for somatic practices that brought on like needing to tie everything in the trauma needing to tie everything together into like a mind, body, spirit type of harmony for me. And so that's where I am now. And I'm trying to help other parents, other moms that are sort of like me, get back to a regulated state, understand energy, understand, like how like important it is to be aware of your subtleties, to be aware of that little tinge that your body is trying to communicate to you. It is an everyday thing with your decisions. I ask my body about the most mundane things because I can trust it now. And before, if for example, we had a surgery for Milo scheduled. He had to have his ears cleaned out. He had to have his teeth cleaned and a tonsillectomy, and have his adenoids removed. And the day before they called me for the time, and I was like, holy shit, we shouldn't do this. I like started to panic. I was like, we got to cancel this. Like, I don't want to do this. And I was like fully like gonna I called them back and I was like, I'm not sure if we need to go through with this tomorrow. I think we might need to reschedule to a different date. And I just realized, okay, my medical trauma is like running the show here, because as soon as I stepped away, I got outside, I grounded my body, I like looked within, I realized, no, this isn't my intuition picking up on something that's horrible that's going to happen. It's just my body reacting to making sure that he needs to be safe at all times, like making sure that his safety is covered, and him going into surgery does not feel safe. But once I came back down, I was like, okay. But it's stuff like that, like I can ask myself and get into my body and ask myself, like, okay, what's the deal? What's going on here? And I will get answers. And I've learned that I have to trust myself. Trusting yourself is like the most important thing you can learn how to do. And in doing that, you have to be as authentic as you possibly can to who you are.
Yeah, it's interesting that I guess that kind of comes back to that fight or flight response as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you've had that
Yeah.
phone call and the immediate panic was to flight, I guess that would be in
Yeah.
that sense, and
Mm-hmm.
to rather than go, okay, we need to go through with this, going, no, 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 I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's again, medical trauma, isn't it?
Yeah.
It does very much come back to them, and even, I mean, especially as Milo has been through all manner of surgeries when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to Hirschsprungs, and you go through pull throughs, and you go through this, that, the other. That actually adenoids doesn't sound so bad
Right.
when you put it against the other surgeries. But it's interesting that that's the point where you've gone, no, I really, really don't want to do this. Bearing in mind
Mm-hmm.
he's been through all manner of
Yeah.
other medical procedures.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just, I had to remind myself of that. I was like, we can do this. Like we've done worse, we've done way worse, and we can get through this. And I have to remind myself that when he gets sick, like just regular common sicknesses that are easy breezy for anybody else. Like when Hirschsprung's, because of Hirschsprung's and anything GI related, if he has a stomach flu, like that impacts us in such a way, because it is a whole other level of anxiety that people do not realize is attached to being sick. So when I find out that there's like a sickness running around in the classroom, I'm like, oh my God.
But
But
that is, you do have to be, as you said before, you do have to be 110% careful. It's,
mm-hmm.
you do have to be on alert more than other people do.
Right. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
There was some kind of, I can't remember what study it was, but like I guess comparing a brain of a special needs parent to someone who was like front lines military, that their level of stress and like PTSD, especially as a medical parent, is like very similar. And when I saw that, I was just like, oh my God,
It makes
that
sense.
it worried me. It worried me about like the longevity of my life, because that's another thing you have to consider. He needs us around for the long haul.
Hmm.
And so if I am so stressed out and I manifested, and a physical ailment in my body because I'm not dealing with my stress in a way that is helpful, then what's going to happen to him? Like all of those things are, sometimes it's just, the worry is unbearable. And so you have to like bring it back to the present. You have to bring it back to like, okay, what can I actually control? Because you can't control very much, but you can control how you're feeling in the moment. Um,
Yeah.
and it helps, but also trying to do some, as soon as you try to make a plan, it's like everything just goes to pot. But
Yeah, yeah, like a lot of things in life. But no, this
exactly.
this has been really eye-opening, and I think not just for me, but for when people listen to this as well.
I
If you
hope
have only
so.
listened to this episode, then please go back and listen to part one as well, because both link together really, really well. And I think this has been, yeah, very, very interesting episode that we've done. And thank you so, so much
You're
for
so
joining
welcome. I'm
me.
so
Just
glad that we continued on.
absolutely. And just very quickly, I know we said it in the last episode, but we'll say it again. Where can people find you?
I'm Somatic Magic Mama on Instagram, and same from the website, somaticmagicmama.com. And what I'm in right now is my shop that I'm opening in May, and I will have some online services available. So, um, yeah, because energy is energy where no matter where you are.
Absolutely. Lovely. Thank you so, so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.